everyone, it's Ryan Fowler here with my good friend Tim Costello, the Inner Game Group. Jordan is out today. He's sick. His throat hurts, so can't talk. And so it's just me and Tim, but we have a good one today. This is really going to highlight the benefits of maybe CBT or just really good advice and compare that to Superneuroplasticity, which is rewiring your subconscious mind so you literally feel differently in the same situation in a good way. Stuff where you were anxious before or you'd get angry before, and you'd kind of, maybe you'd lose your temper, or just someone says something and it really hurts you. We can literally rewire that out of you so that when that happens next time, you just feel neutral. And then the good advice people are giving you as to how to react in these situations, because you're feeling neutral, you're not triggered, you are in a position to intelligently use this advice. And so we're going to play a clip by this man who gives some good advice, but we're going to kind of, so honestly, you really do need both. You need to know what to do, and then you need to have the good emotional, psychological, subconscious backdrop that empowers you to do it. So it'll be interesting today, this clip that we have. But before we dive into that, Tim, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Tim Costello with Tim Costello Hypnosis, solely focusing on, in my hypnosis practice, on clearing trauma. Because I find that most of all the other things that we want to participate in or clear up or fix are usually rooted to our trauma. And we like to clear that because that gives you a level playing field to get out there and be successful.
All right. Thank you, Tim. So we're going to dive in. And yeah, we're going to try and let every point play before we comment on it, which we are not always the best at in the past. So this gentleman here, he actually... he has a lot of videos where he just gives good advice. I don't know if he's a psychologist, but he kind of makes me think he has some sort of this background, but he does know his stuff. So let's go ahead and dive into this. By the way, just real quick, we have a new school platform, school.com/RyanFowlerSOS-7231. We have a free self-hypnosis course, free ebook on how your subconscious mind works, why it keeps you stuck. The free course isn't just information. A lot of people will kind of tease you in, say free this and that, and it's just information, but then to actually get something that benefits, you got to pay. That's not the situation here. There's actual self-hypnosis audios, training. We've been getting big results with the people. Our old group was Mind Chrysalis. This is a new group. And so all those features will be up, the course, free course, everything up by Sunday night. 2 day, day and a half from now. So be sure to join now. Lots of good free resources and just a community of people that are actively helping each other with these techniques to rewire your subconscious mind. The stuff you've been struggling with your entire life. You're like, why do I procrastinate? Or why am I always anxious here? Why do I procrastinate with this stuff, but this other stuff I'm fine? Well, it's your subconscious. And we can literally fix that. And then you just moving forward. So be sure to check that out. And here we go into the clip. And do you have anything to add before we get started?
Nope. I say we roll with it and we'll hit that first point and then tear it apart and have a good time with it.
All right. Rock and roll. And yeah, we'll start.
How to deal with poison, toxin. As we talk about toxic family members, I think that there's some overlap here that might be helpful. 3 different strategies or approaches. So let's just say that you've been exposed to something toxic. Sometimes when we're out hiking or something, we might brush up against some stinging nettle or some poison ivy.
Yeah, this will probably skip ahead just a second. I remember this now.
Those are toxic. Let's talk. This is what you would want to do if you run across some stinging nettle, for example. You want the toxic exposure. So in a relationship setting, the initial sting can sometimes be diffused or diluted a little bit through self-care. Taking care of yourself in a way that fortifies you against these brushes. You'll find that you're much more resilient. For example, when you're getting enough sleep, when you've fed yourself well, you've got proper nutrition, if you're getting regular exercise, all of these elements of self-care help to dilute the initial effect of having a toxic interaction with someone. Another thing that's been shown through the research and the literature is debriefing.
Okay, so let's cover those two things. So he briefly mentioned, just minimize your exposure to the toxic people. Oftentimes, that's called going no contact or limited contact. I'm absolutely a fan of that. And then he went on to this second topic. Do you want to cover both, Tim? What would you say?
I think we just need to pause here for a second. And one of the things, so Dr. Paul here, he is and Paul Jenkins is his name. Okay. He is a clinical psychologist, and he deals with the science and practice of positivity. Now, positivity is good because we need to treat ourselves well and treat other people well additionally. But there is also this thing called toxic positivity. And somebody brought that up to me the other day, and I thought, that's right. And that is sort of the lollipops and sunshine, nothing is wrong no matter what happens type of world. And that is just as bad as the other things we're going to talk about because it doesn't deal in reality. It becomes pathological, which is, detached
it's like a
from
mask of positivity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. So
you got to keep it real, man.
Yes. When he says toxic, let's talk about what toxic is. In the human behavior world, and Ryan talks about this often, going back to our caveman roots, if you will, in that tribal psychology, we are hunter-gatherers. We, find stuff, we kill it, we drag it back, we grow gardens, we gather fruit and vegetables that are wild, whatever it is.
Yeah,
that's what we do. And that is a very active and forthright activity. Should someone do something to you to interrupt you in that activity, that becomes what you would consider toxic, or they trigger you. Now, in today's society, since we're so far from the hunter-gatherer world, toxicity now is that those people who are trying to restrict or limit your agency in some way, with or without your knowledge, or maybe even seeing how you're miswired from birth and trying to control you in that manner. I'm dealing with a couple right now, actually one of the couple, the other couple I hear about, but they talk about the toxic relationship. Both of them are damaged. Both of them could be fabulously wonderful individuals, but together they have a toxic relationship, which means one's always trying to control the other through gaslighting, passive aggressive nature, whatever. That's what Dr. Jenkins is talking about. That's what toxicity is.
Yeah.
So I wanted to define that because sometimes we use the word toxic and it means just about anything you want.
Yeah. And like manipulation, control, we're not talking persuasion. Persuasion is convincing that other person that, hey, this really is in your best interest. When without using deception.
Correct. Correct.
Oh, I'm telling you it's in your best interest, but it's really not. Well, that's a con man.
So this is in your best interest,
and they come around, it is in their best interest. That's persuasion. That's fine, but you're not forcing them. But then when you are through any number of means getting people to do things that's not in their best interest, that is you using ways to control them that involve deception, involves intimidation, involves over or covert psychological or physical force, that's when it becomes abusive. Yeah.
So he used a couple words, influence and persuasion. So if Ryan and I were having a discussion and we weren't coming to agreement I might throw some things out there that he wasn't aware of or didn't know about, a piece of intellectual information or something like that. And it would happen vice versa. And then both of us would start critically thinking about that particular piece of information and come to our own conclusion closer or further away than where we before, whatever it happens to be. But that's what Ryan's talking about. That is healthy interaction and persuasion and influence, right? I would like to influence you, Ryan. Let me tell you these 10 things. You chew over them for an hour. Let's get back together and see what we come up with.
Yeah.
Where what Ryan is talking about on the flip side is you have a damaged person and the other person can now gaslight them, make them think they're crazy,
shame them,
threaten them. Maybe they're bigger than the other person. I mean, who knows what, but
yeah.
Just like in a pack of dogs, the biggest dog is not always the pack leader. It's the dog who is psychologically in control of the pack.
Yeah,
Could be
which
small,
could
could be
be
big,
through
could be
benevolent means.
Yes,
it could be everyone likes that dog because he's a super charming dog.
Absolutely.
Or he's very good at getting everyone in the pack just to get along.
That's correct.
Correct.
So that's what toxicity is that this Dr. Jenkins is talking about. Now, his first point was self-care, right? You definitely need to take care of yourself. You need to sleep enough. You need to eat nutritionally somewhat. You need to participate in a little bit of exercise. You need to exercise your brain. All those typical things that I'm not going to make an exclusive list, but it's very many things that people do. That takes you and makes you more resilient, like he said. So when somebody is around you that is toxic, you're able to recognize that first of all, but then secondly, fend off the attack. Go ahead, Ryan.
So everything you said is true. And there is a big but here for me. Our body is a collection of interconnected systems. They are all interconnected. Our health physically affects our psychological health to a point. Our psychological health affects our physical health. So getting enough sleep or just whatever, it's all interconnected. So if you take care of one part of your system, to some degree, other parts are going to improve. And so you will be more resilient psychologically when these other parts, physically, etc., are taken care of. But with that said, the benefit you get from that, and you should have self-care, but the benefit you get from that to make you more resilient to handle toxic people is a small percentage of the benefit you get from rewiring your subconscious mind. And this is what I mean. And I have experienced this because, I was raised in a very toxic household. And from time to time, I come across toxic people and interact with them now. And how I feel now interacting with toxic people is completely different, massively different from interacting with toxic people before. Before, toxic people, especially the narcissistic, sociopathic type, or people who lean that way, BPD, they're very good at probing you for your psychological weaknesses and then using that as leverage against you. And the number one tool they typically use is some form of shame. It's not the only tool, but it's probably the most powerful one that they have. I mean, there's intimidation, there's deception, there's, so it's a combination of things. In the past, because I had a ton of toxic shame in me, I'm not good enough, shame would be used as a tool, and my reaction would be to feel really bad. And then when I felt really bad, our brain wants us to avoid pain, and we adopt, as we grow up, everyone has a little toxic shame. Some people have a massive amount. So if you don't get this toxic shame out of you, there tends to be some sort of response when you feel it to make that feeling go away. That can be engaging in addictive behavior to cover the pain with pleasure, or whether it's binge eating or drugs or alcohol or porn or whatever. It could be you just shut down and dissociate. It could be you rationalize and say, well, no, that's not true. I'm not, they're trying to shame me, but, blah, blah, blah. But still, now you engage in an argument with them to defend yourself. You get defensive. That is another. So we have all these responses to being shamed, because if we have some toxic shame, some bad subconscious programming in our psyche, I'm not good enough, in some way, I am an ugly, disgusting person, and someone calls me ugly, it really hurts me, because I'm very insecure about my weight or just whatever. Just any sort of deficiency we feel we have. If we have a belief that because of that deficiency, it makes it not good enough, people can poke at that and it hurts.
Yep.
But now people will pull crap on me and they'll criticize me or whatever. And now I will say, I don't have 100% of the toxic shame out of me. It's probably like 99% out. It's like, but in most situations, people will pull little manipulative tactics on me, and they will do little things to try and shame me or control me or whatever. In the past, it would hurt me. In almost all situations now, I literally feel nothing. I just feel neutral. And in a very, maybe, like I said, maybe got 1% of the toxic shame there for just a small number of situations. So in a small number of situations, maybe I feel something like 2 out of 10, like very low level. That's about it. So what happens is these manipulative people, that weapon no longer works against you. Now, it doesn't mean you want to hang out with these people, because honestly, it's still kind of annoying. It's like,
yep.
It's like,
quit acting like that.
Cut it out, you moron. I might call them a moron if they're really egregious about it, but I probably won't. But, I just feel kind of neutral, and I'm just like, no. All right. I remember there was this one time, when I was living in Texas, I had these sculptures. It was like a glass table, and then the stand was like a sculpture of the Greek muses. So technically part of them were naked, but it was like a sculpture, and you can't see any nipples or anything. It's just, it's the form. It's not really pornographic. My mom comes in and starts like criticizing me about it, and I just literally don't care. And she's like, oh, blah, 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 this, I can't, because she's very religious, and she's like, naked women are bad. And, again, it's a sculpture, and you can't even see any nipples or anything. It's like, whatever. And I just say, Mom, I just absolutely love naked women, and I left it at that.
Yep.
And the truth is, I did not give a shit.
So let's close this part up here as we go, because I love it, Ryan. So the toxic environment is the triggering environment. You've got some subconscious program that was tuned up when you were 0 to 8 years old, or 8 to 14, a little bit more. Yeah. But essentially 0 to 8 was shame, toxic shame, etc., manipulation. So now when you deal with these people, this could say how to deal with members of your family who trigger you. That could be the title of this topic, because that's what he's talking about. That is what's toxic.
Toxic
Somebody
people
trying to trigger you.
They trigger your insecurities, your doubts, your fears. Go and remove the doubts, the fears. And our program does that right there. Go there. The program will be up by Sunday night. We're switching school communities. It's free. It makes you aware of the trauma in you. It puts you, it connects you to it. So you got to face it. And then you listen to a self-hypnosis audio, and you go in and you connect to this feeling. Like, when I fail, it means I'm a failure, I'm a loser. You're going to connect to that feeling, connect to that program, and then following the instructions in the self-hypnosis audio. Sometimes it takes 4 or 5 listens, sometimes 1, and then it's just gone. It's just permanently gone. And the next time you're in the situation where you normally would feel bad, you now just feel,
Okay, so to wrap up self-care, you got to take care of yourself. And part of that taking care of yourself is getting your subconscious programs realigned so that they help you and not hurt you.
That's an excellent way to put it. And these psychologists have a lot of helpful tips. They don't know how to do what we just mentioned. They don't know how to quickly, rapidly rewire your subconscious, even though the scientific research has been done. As evidence, my 4-part series on superneuroplasticity, Dr. Andrew Huberman, Stanford neuroscientist, talks about all this research has been established that this works. So we are adding to all the good information he's giving today.
All right, let's get on to debriefing.
We use this primarily to address traumatic incidents, but it's also true in a toxic interaction with a family member, a coworker, someone in your world that has that sting. Being able to debrief that with someone, just talk it through, tell them what happened, chat with someone about it. That helps to dilute the sting a little bit initially and some of the long-term effects of that toxic interaction. And then finally, on this first level of intervention, I would say perspective.
Okay, so he's talking about the sting. You rewire your subconscious, the sting is literally gone. But with that said, when someone's trying to mess with you, someone is toxic, still talk to someone else because they will help you get perspective. And, I recently had someone engage in some toxic behavior with me. I talked to other people about it just to make sure, hey, am I doing the right thing cutting this off, or am I just looking at this wrong? And then my friends were like, oh, no, you need to cut this off. And I did. And it is helpful to get that reassurance. So regardless, talk it out with others who you trust and, and you trust. Absolutely, that's helpful. But that sting he's talking about, you can make it so it just, that sting isn't there. And that's what we do.
Correct.
Anything to add before we move on?
No, these are, so remember the first 3 things that the first good piece of advice he gave was to rinse the toxicity. In other words, get rid of it, dilute it, etc.
No
and
contact,
then jump
or
into
minimize
self-care.
contact. Yeah.
What's that?
No contact or minimize contact.
Right.
Yeah.
Self-care, and then this debriefing. And this debriefing is important. And he's going to touch on a few things as we go through this. But part of that debriefing is also determining, school.com/RyanFowlerSOS-7231. You can go there, get free tools that now give you better perspective to debrief yourself, to understand exactly what you're dealing with. Ryan developed this thing called a descriptive word list. In this descriptive word list, I give the counsel to my clients that, 1, hold it in front of you, read one word at a time out loud, and wait. If nothing triggers, go on to the next word.
Okay.
If you feel anything, put a check mark next to that word. Because part of this process of understanding what triggers you, it gives you the ability to dive deeper into that thing that's triggering you, and you will discover things that are big triggers and things that are small triggers. So this is a very good list to give you perspective and is part of the debriefing process, because now you can take that thing that is triggering you and use the superneuroplasticity that we use to rid yourself of that trauma.
No more sting. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, Tim. We'll keep going.
Is important. Keep it in perspective. How big of a deal is it really? Now, I know in the moment it feels huge, but backing up.
Feels huge if you're triggered.
Yes.
If you get it out of your subconscious, you're no longer triggered.
From taking a higher perspective, a higher altitude view of it, it starts to shrink down. I had an experience where I got to visit the Arctic Circle in Rovaniemi, Finland. When I was visiting, I saw this sign. You've seen signs before that are "you are here" kind of signs. Well, this sign had a picture of the world, the entire globe. And there was a little dotted line around the top of it with an arrow pointing to it. And in Finnish, it said, "You are here." And the perspective just almost blew my mind, because I was having some personal stress in my life, like we always do at different phases of our life. And seeing that arrow pointing to the top of the world, I realized, wow, most of the problems and the challenges that are going on in the world are down below me somewhere, because I'm up here on top of the world, literally. And it caused everything to shrink into a perspective that said, you know what, it's important to me, but in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not that big of a deal. Keeping that kind of a perspective helps to alleviate some of that initial sting as well. Now let's move to the second.
Okay. Any
Let's stop
comments?
there for a second. Yeah, good stop.
It's good advice. This guy gives good advice.
Yep.
We just have some stuff that can massively add to everything he's doing.
Now, one of the points I'd like to make here is that if you are severely triggered, this is your whole globe. This is, and so you don't have perspective. What you have is this choking feeling that your world is crashing in on you and you can't control it.
Yeah.
That's key. Now, this is great advice here from the doc, talking about gaining perspective, because in reality, this particular thing is not that big a deal to the whole world. It's just a big deal to your world. So then the question is, how do you make it not a big deal? We've already mentioned rewiring your subconscious programs through superneuroplasticity. So one, this particular thing that is ending your world doesn't end your world, and you no longer feel the effect of it.
Yeah. Now I want to point out kind of a fundamentally what we do, and then fundamentally what he does. So our subconscious mind is the source of our emotions, instinct, intuition, those three things. So when you have an emotional response, that is something in the outside world is a match for subconscious beliefs and the feelings tied to that belief. And that belief gets triggered, whether it's joy or anger or just, anxiety, just whatever. Anxiety is actually perceived, oh, I'm in a situation where there could be emotional pain or some other type of pain, and my brain gives me anxiety to get out of there, to avoid it. That's the flight part of fight or flight. So we literally rewire the beliefs in you. So in the same situation, whereas before you were triggered and feeling negative emotions and, then you overreact, it becomes your whole world, like Tim puts it. Now the feelings are different. And like I said, in a lot of these situations where previously someone would do something and you get very hurt or just whatever, or fearful or whatever, and a predatory toxic person would use this trigger, how he got you in an emotional state, to manipulate you. Well, we literally change the root emotions and beliefs so that you just don't feel them the night, or you feel something different. Now, what the good doctor is doing here, and honestly, you should do both. Because even when you fix a lot of your subconscious, it's so vast. There's, every now and then I still find something. Oh, geez, I got this thing in me I need to fix. Maybe it's low level. All the big stuff's been fixed. But our psyche's vast. It's never going to be completely pristine. But when you use certain cognitive techniques, such as he's doing a type of what's called a reframe, and reframing is, I'm looking at it this way. This is horrible. This is going to tear my entire world apart. And he's saying, well, look at it. How bad is it really? And one thing I like to tell myself and have my clients tell themselves is when they're going through something really rough, say, this is only temporary. Now, obviously, if it's like the death of a loved one, that's permanent. But most of the crises we face are temporary. They can be very bad, but most of them are temporary. So, and that just helps put things in perspective. So a lot of his tips and things he's doing when he's saying, hey, say this to yourself to put it in perspective, look at it this way instead. He's using cognitive thought processes and what cognitive, looking at things from a different perspective consciously, or like how you talk to yourself. Like if you really mess something up and embarrass yourself, and then you say, hey, it's not so bad. I'll get it the next time. I actually didn't mess it up quite as bad as the time before. I'm going to practice this and come back. So your self-talk, or what you cognitively tell yourself, can partially modify the feelings after they come up.
Yep.
So it's probably too long-winded, but
no, it's fine. It's good.
TLDR is we change the initial emotional response. What he's saying is after you have that sting, after you've been triggered, after whatever, talk to yourself in a certain way to partially modify and make that negative response better. We make it so there's little or no negative response in the first place. Now, you cannot, we never make you into, we never become robots. We're still emotional human beings. We just make your emotions much more healthily regulated. So, you can do self-hypnosis, superneuroplasticity, all day, every day. And if a loved one dies, you're going to be sad, because we are emotional beings, and that's actually a correct response. But these things, these triggers, that doesn't serve you. That doesn't help you at all. We literally get that out of you. But furthermore, you still want this good self-talk because, if you talk to yourself in the optimal way, it's going to help you feel better regardless.
Yes.
So best case scenario is use both together. Use these techniques he recommends with what we do. But isn't it just amazing if your initial emotional response in the past, you're always wrecked over certain things, and now your emotional response is it's okay. Like that's what automatically comes up. It's okay. So you may not even need to use a lot of his techniques, although it's still beneficial. You really want both, man. I mean,
so let's talk about what Dr.
fixing
Jenkins,
the root cause is the most important thing to do.
right? Let's talk about what Dr. Jenkins is doing.
Yeah.
He's doing what hundreds of thousands of other psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists do, and that is deal with the event that's coming up with nothing more than dilution, distance, reframing, like Ryan's talking, to help you make better. It doesn't change the trigger. You're going to get triggered again in the exact same way from before. So if you could use all those techniques, but having rewired your subconscious first, now you get less of a trigger and you know how to deal with the trigger. We also, you'll see.
He manages the trigger. We eliminate it.
Yeah, there's another guy out there. He talks about game, frame, muscles, and money kind of thing.
Yeah,
and the most two parts of all that particular thing is the game and the frame.
Yeah.
So the inner game is your subconscious programming. It's the thing that serves you or does not serve you. If you get that inner game dialed in correctly, trauma removed, and programmed for success, understanding what failure really is and how to deal with people, how to help people, and all that kind of stuff, that's your inner game. You get that solid, there are no triggers. Ask Ryan. Literally nobody can trigger me. I have zero triggers.
Okay, yeah, you are one of those just very rare people that just had awesome parents, man.
I was very, very lucky. Very, very lucky.
You're a very psychologically healthy guy, and yeah, man. I mean, people try and pull crap on you, and it doesn't work.
So I have no triggers. That's how I want you to be, because once you have that solid inner game, then you build a frame, right? And then you have those people, when they bang against that frame, you get to decide whether or not they come inside that frame or not. And that's part of that separation, or boundaries, not putting up with it, or not being triggered, right? So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the solid inner game, and then constructing that frame from which you won't put up with some crap. So that's what's important, because talk about dealing with stuff. They don't get triggered. If you want to act like an idiot around me, I walk away.
Yeah. You're just like, what's up with this guy? See ya. And that guy might be calling you. Maybe he's like making fun that, you're bald or just whatever. I think your bald head's awesome, by the way, but I'm just giving an example. He makes fun of you for something you just don't care. You're like, whatever.
Yeah, well, just want you to know, God made a few perfect heads. And the rest covered with hair.
Yeah, that's a good subconscious belief to have.
But anyway,
well, and I want to point out. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the key. Game and frame. Those are the two most important.
Yeah. So if someone insults Tim, he's like, whatever, I don't care. You might have another person gets insulted and feels really bad and goes into a deep depression because they have different subconscious programs. Now, the difference between me and Tim is Tim had awesome parents, and so just a very healthy, confident, natural psychology. I got to that point with superneuroplasticity, rewiring my brain. And I've recently had to enforce some boundaries. And you know what? I freaking did it. Whereas in the past, I totally wouldn't have. And that's because I rewired my subconscious so that I'm able to do that. I don't
You're
get triggered.
able to critically think.
I can look at things objectively without losing my crap and then say, okay, this is an unpleasant course to take, but it's necessary. And I'm not losing my crap, and let's execute. And then we execute, because I'm not losing I'm not triggered. Okay. So, yeah, P-dubs.
So Ryan's point there, by the way, in case anybody missed it, is my solid programming came when I was young. Ryan's solid programming came when he did it himself when he was older. We now have the exact same programming. We got the exact same programming now. I just had mine before and he's got his now. That was the point he was making, that even if you grow up in a toxic environment, you can get that solid psychological foundation later in life.
Yeah. And that's the methods we use. I used to have very severe manic depression, especially on the depression side. I used to have anxiety all the time, and it would sometimes get triggered to 10 out of 10. I've never had a panic attack, but it's just like massive anxiety. I used to have internalized rage, anger. People could set me off, and I just get really angry, but I would then internalize it. I would maybe initially lash out, but quickly withdraw. It just had all these issues with my incredibly toxic upbringing. They're gone. They're just gone. And now someone tries to mess with me, and I'm like, okay. And that's about it, But then if someone repeatedly does that, or even if they establish any sort of pattern whatsoever, I will in almost all circumstances, just withdraw from them.
That's it.
Yeah. And what happens is when you withdraw from toxic people, when you understand, hey, I'm worth something, I matter, and therefore this isn't cool what they're doing, and you get those people out of your life, it's only a matter of time before they are replaced with really good people. And my friends in general are just amazing human beings. Yep. Tim, Exhibit A. Because I won't put up with people who don't treat me right. So,
Bingo.
But when I had my trauma, I had all sorts of negative friends because it was kind of a match for my belief system. I'm not worth that much. I kind of deserve this. I mean, that's how I was raised. So, yeah. All right. So back to the good doctor here. Oops. Oh, no. All right. Here we go. We got to reshare. Oh. Okay. Rock and roll.
Level of dealing with that toxic or poisonous interaction. This is where it's already been ingested. Maybe it's starting to have some effect. Maybe it's more of a longer term thing that you're dealing with. We want to purge, antidote, counteract, or remove, if possible, the poison, the toxin from our system. So as that relates to relationships, we're now getting into what we're trying to do here on this channel through positivity training.
Okay, let's hang on there real quick.
Mind.
Yeah, he's showing you how to manage stuff that doesn't get in you when your subconscious is good.
But he did mention that one thing, remove if possible, right? To get rid of that trigger, that trauma.
That's important.
And look, tremendously. If you go to Dr. Jenkins, you might have to go to him for 15 years, every other week, paying him whatever they pay him to rewire your brain, to remove, if possible, some of those traumas, because you can affect some level of neuroplasticity, not super neuroplasticity, but neuroplasticity over time and repetition and doing a lot of very strict discipline things, etc. Or because you've treated yourself so badly for so long because of how you were raised, you can now see us, clear the trauma, and then go to someone like Dr. Jenkins, and Dr. Jenkins's and others' methods will be 100% more effective. I always say 1,000, but there really is no 1,000%, but 100% more effective, because now the trauma's gone, and then they can start teaching you how to use that positivity to be nice to yourself, to congratulate yourself. And it's very silly, right? In the beginning, when you get your trauma cleared, you are essentially that inner child where that child left off and was becoming abused at that point. So now you're very excited and giddy, and you need a lot of help to counteract all the things you're used to doing by habit. Putting yourself down. It just comes so natural that now that you're clear, you're like, you don't want to do that, because you could rewire yourself back there. So you really need other helps, self-hypnosis audios, positive motivational stuff, that kind of stuff, to rewire your behavior, not just your subconscious program, but now your behavior that is so well learned and established. Super, super important. So superneuroplasticity first, all that other therapy next, and it'll be a lot more effective.
Yeah, superneuroplasticity, almost immediate, usually one session, often one session, rewiring of certain subconscious programs. You talked about repetition and neuroplasticity. So when you are exposed to something over and over and over again over a long period of time, that will slowly rewire your brain to a degree. Mm-hmm. And this is why you do want toxic people out of your life. In any one situation, if someone's toxic to you, if your inner world is healthy, you're like, whatever, I don't care. But if you keep them around you and they are constantly berating you, then that repetition slowly over time can get to you, even if you're an emotionally healthy person. So that's why you do want to get these people out of your life. But furthermore, what you mentioned, Tim, is if you go to a therapist over and over and over, and you use their tips, and so you are constantly applying their techniques, then slowly over time that can help. It may not take 15 years. I did do 15 years of therapy on and off over like 100 sessions over 15 years. It fixed about 60% of my depression very slowly over time. It may be the first 3-4 months, it was starting to help me feel better somewhat. But then I found superneuroplasticity, the self-hypnosis, 2 months. The last few years of therapy didn't do anything. It never reduced my anxiety at all. Didn't do very much for my anger, my rage. Found superneuroplasticity, and then I say in 2 months or less, I mean, really within like 3 weeks, it was almost all gone. And then within 2 months, all my depression complete, all this stuff the last few years of therapy couldn't touch, and all the anger rage just completely, totally gone. Correct. It just blew my mind so much quicker, so much more powerful, went so much deeper, so much faster. But repetition works too. It's just a lot slower.
And what's key is when you get your super neuroplasticity from us and you get some of those traumas removed, you need to get out of the environment that's causing those triggers, because you could be re-traumatized as well. Super important.
When you feel better about yourself, you believe you have ability and value, that environment's no longer a match for you. You're like, this is gross, I'm out of here.
Yep.
Whereas if you feel, oh, I have low value, then you're going to accept being treated like you have low value.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's Carrie.
So, yeah, man.
She's timing in. Hello, Carrie.
Oh, hey.
She's out with the grandkids this weekend, so I got the shop all to myself.
And Carrie, huge success story. Your business just keeps making more and more money. She tried 20, 30 times start a business. Her anxiety prevented her from moving forward. One session, superneuroplasticity, got rid of it. And you guys are just growing and growing and growing, and she's keeping you extremely busy. So Hi, Carrie. Welcome to the show. And we'll keep moving forward. Oh.
To see things differently, or to take something that's already happened way back in the past sometime and rework that in our present thinking to the point where it's not having the same toxic effect. Therapy counseling, coaching. These are all examples of what we can do to deal with that toxic relationship that's already taken hold, that tends to be more long-term. And I would add to this, building up and enhancing and enriching positive relationships. Think of it as an antidote for some of the toxic ones.
And many people can't get that if they feel they don't deserve it, which is why you got to rewire your subconscious. They'll get out of one toxic relationship, like, sexual relationship, significant other. They get divorced, or they just break up with their boyfriend or girlfriend. And then they get in another one, and it's like, oh crap, this is another toxic person. I initially thought they were great, but they were actually toxic. Yeah, because you were a subconscious match for that person, unfortunately.
It was
rewire your subconscious, and then the positive people without that, even if they, a lot of these toxic people hide it initially, and then it comes out later. But our subconscious is super smart. Our subconscious processes 1,000 times more per second than our conscious mind. When we meet someone, our subconscious mind notices the dilation of the eyes, the heart rate, the breathing patterns, intonation, posture, everything. It takes it all in and gives you a gut feeling. But if you have a bunch of trauma in you, it mucks up with that whole situation and actually may attract you to toxic people who, for example, were a match for your childhood environment. You got to rewire that, and then you will naturally be repelled more and more by toxic people and naturally attracted more and more. Even if these toxic people initially are like really nice and whatnot, you're going to tend to just naturally gravitate towards healthy people.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'll toss down there is that your subconscious programming, Ryan mentioned how complex and correct it is. It will drive you to comfortable and familiar situations, which could be a toxic environment, just because you're used to living there and you're used to dealing there, and you sort of know how your place within that package.
Familiar. You may be, toxic situations may be familiar towards you, and you gravitate towards them because of that familiarity.
Yep. All right, let's keep rolling.
Rock and roll.
You'll notice that who you hang out with matters. In fact, I've heard it so many times in the professional speaking industry that you become the average of the 5 people you hang out with.
That's repetition, slowly rewiring your brain, being constantly exposed to that.
The most. We want to create positive, inspiring, uplifting, affirming relationships in our life, which will help us to counteract or provide an antidote for some of the toxic ones that have shown up in the past. As I was perusing through the poison control website and looking at some of the resources there, it became obvious that a big part of their focus is this third level of how we deal with toxins or poisons. And that has to do with prevention, protection, avoidance of future or further contact with that toxic element. Let's apply that to the relationships. What can we do to provide some level of protection or precaution that will protect us in the future from experiencing that toxicity? I think one of the important things we can do is to set appropriate boundaries and limits. Nobody else is going to do this for you.
Bingo.
So it's important that you...
Yeah, that's your frame. That's what he's talking about. And you know what? If you still have tremendously strong maladaptive programs in your subconscious, you don't know where the boundary is. You're not sure exactly where to place it. And then you're likely going to go talk to your toxic friends who are going to tell you where those boundaries are, and they may or may not be correct.
Yeah, EC, welcome to the show. Well said. Well said, Tim. I was going to say something. I lost my train of thought. Darn it.
Boundaries, frame.
Boundaries. Okay, so one thing I want to mention is we did a podcast, I don't know, a few weeks ago with Dr. Ramaswamy. She is considered one of the world's leading, she's a university professor in California, I think UC maybe Davis. Consider one of the top authorities in the world on narcissism. And she says 1 in 10 people, we now have a society that promotes narcissism. So it's become much more prevalent. And that's the whole Instagram, TikTok, all that, putting up a false front. She says 1 in 10 people are full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. She said 1 in 6, if not full-blown, have strong toxic narcissistic traits. There actually are some narcissistic traits to a point that are healthy. But we're talking about the people where it's really a problem. 1 out of 6. So you are, and that's just narcissism. That's not sociopathy, borderline personality disorder, histrionic. She's talking about that. I once read this study that if that 30% of divorced people have a personality disorder, a toxic one. And it kind of makes sense because it's like, well, the emotionally healthy people are much less likely to get divorced.
Correct.
So if you are dating divorced people, it's almost a 1 in 3 chance any particular person you date is going to be toxic. So, and hey, if you meet them on an app, you're not going to be able to filter that out. But honestly, a lot of these people, some people right up front, I get a vibe, and I know they're not good news, but it doesn't always happen. Some people can actually be pretty good for a long time, but they kind of get conditionally triggered. So like their toxicity, when they're going through a bad period of their life, all of a sudden their dark triads traits comes out where they may exhibit a little bit of it prior to that. But it gets a lot worse when they get triggered, when they're insecure, and then they start just abusing others to compensate for how they feel. So you are going to run across toxic people. You cannot filter all of them out. When you figure out who they are, then you can. But we're just running into so many that you are going to run across them. So you do need to know how to manage them. And so the management skills he's talking about are very helpful, but man, just get your subconscious so it's just not vulnerable to these guys. And anything to add, Tim?
No, sir. You're rolling, man. Good spot.
You identify what's okay, what's not okay. What will I allow?
That's where boundaries come in. That's my whole point. Get rid of them. Once they start exhibiting it, okay, maybe someone's having an off day, but if it goes beyond that, then maybe you work with them and you can't get rid of them. Well, limit contact. Just be very neutral around them with your behavior. But if you can get rid of them, absolutely enforce those boundaries and just cut them off.
Allow, what will I not allow? What positions am I willing to put myself in versus what positions am I not going to get into? You get to set these limits. Setting them appropriately and assertively is a great way to protect yourself from future toxic exposure.
Yep.
In doing this, we get to use assertive communication. Assertive and aggressive are not the same thing. I've worked with so many clients who feel a little resistance to the assertiveness training that I do because they're afraid it might come across as being mean. No, don't be mean. Be very kind. You are a kind, loving, generous, benevolent person. Show up that way and use assertive communication that sends a very clear message to those around you about the boundaries we already talked about. Now, a final thought on the protection end of things. It's okay to opt out when it makes sense, when it's appropriate. It's okay for you to opt out of an event, an interaction, a conversation, if it's not going well for you. If it is in fact toxic, this is a way that you can protect yourself against those effects. So it's okay, for example, to say, you know what, this conversation is not serving me well right now, and then opt out. If you're on the phone, you can actually hang up. You got a little button for that. I wonder if we could use that as part of our protection plan.
Let's
nice.
stop there for a second. We chuckle about that, but he's talking about skipping events that may involve a bunch of toxic people or hanging up on the phone and stuff. Could you imagine the irate natured recall when you hang up on somebody who is triggering you and they meaning to trigger you, and they're the manipulation and the intimidation? Could you imagine the next one? That's why you don't hang up, because you don't want that next one. So there's that manipulation and intimidation to stay on that phone call. It's going to take a really strong, maladaptive, programmed person to hang up, and they likely won't do it. Or nowadays, like, oh, I hit a bad cell, you know, and hang up the phone or something.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a callback, guaranteed.
Don't pick it up.
Yep. And there, yeah, well, again, you know, there's a lot of different variable relationships out there, or various relationships. And depending upon the need to be around that other person, like maybe they're providing your home, maybe they're providing your ride to work, who knows what. But you're going to have to make some adjustment in order to hang up on them.
Yeah. Now
right?
we
hang up on life.
Yeah. And we do live in a complicated world. Toxicity is on a spectrum. Maybe someone's like a little toxic, but they have a lot of good traits too. And the net effect is it is a benefit to have them in your life. Okay, keep them in your life. When they are toxic, assert yourself and say, hey, man, you know, this ain't cool. You know, I don't like it when you do this. But they're still worth keeping in your life because of other benefits they provide.
Yes. Yes.
So he did not give you any hard and fast rules for this is when you cut people off or don't. He actually said you get to set the limits, because we live in a complicated society. And the truth is, there's some great people out there. There's some people you should avoid at all costs. And then there's a bunch of people in between.
Yep.
And so I would say for me, when someone ceases to become a net benefit in your life, that's when you say no. And in the meantime, it's like, yeah, he's usually cool, but sometimes he's kind of a dick. But you know, overall, he does, you know, 90% of the time he's just fine. And when he's a dick, it's kind of just a little sarcasm or, you know, whatever. And, you know,
but you get to choose.
Opportunity. You get to choose.
Yeah, you get to choose where that boundary is.
And listen to your gut, and it will be your guide. A lot of people won't do this because they were raised by toxic parents where it just wasn't an option to disconnect. Correct. They were in that home. And so they don't even consider having boundaries as an adult if their boundaries were constantly violated as children. That's what their subconscious is used to. Rewire that, and then it becomes so much easier to do what the good doctor's saying when your subconscious is aligned with that.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what you were talking about earlier. It's so much easier to pick this stuff up and to do what they're saying when your subconscious is in a good place, because all of these strategies and everything, it is how an emotionally healthy person like Tim naturally acts when you were raised that way, you know? So, that's pretty much it. He might have a little bit more here. We're close.
Not much, but you know, Ryan talks about him being fixed. And what was really interesting is I've always been attracted to Ryan for his intellectual prowess. Yeah. This guy is freaking smart, even in the massive depths of depression. When I knew him from 18, 19 years ago, that didn't bother me so much because he wasn't triggering me and I wasn't triggering him. And he may have been going through his things, but it didn't affect me. And we were there benefiting each other, not only business wise, but
we did have a lot of fun, man.
Well, yeah, we had a lot of fun. And I never knew he was going through that. I just thought he was a late sleeper.
Why is this guy? You come in and I'm still in bed.
And again, I'm telling you, and I'll leave this as we exit
trauma,
here.
Man. It was trauma.
The reason I became a hypnotist was because I saw the change in Ryan 5 years ago this month.
And how big of a change was that from you knew the traumatized me back in 2005.
Yep.
So 19 years ago. Then 5 years ago, after I'd done all the internal rewiring subconsciously, 5 years ago, you saw like the new improved me, Superneuroplasticity changed my life.
Yeah,
How big of a difference was that?
he looked different. He acted different, still intellectual. We still had very, very good tingling conversations and stuff like that. But there was something different about his behavior, that he wasn't like a afraid dog anymore, like a scared dog, you know, looking for someone to attack him. He was like, and he wasn't even fully fixed then. He was just a lot fixed. And now he's a lot more fixed.
All my depression, anxiety, all of that was gone at that point, but that was probably just when I was starting to get back into dating. And then all the dating insecurities that I had cleared, because I hadn't been exposing myself to dating. I was probably in the middle of clearing those when you met me. But already
it was a massive change.
And I was making probably twice or probably 2.5 times the income as when you initially knew me. I'd say probably twice. Because you the first few years you knew me, I was actually doing pretty good. We were doing pretty good. And then anyways, long story. So it really works. Rewire your subconscious and use the suggestions to manage life. And when you get both, what the good doctor says to do, and then just get yourself emotionally healthy at a deep core level in the first place, you can have a great life. You can become very tough, very resilient. These people come your way, and you handle them like a boss, and you don't lose your crap. You keep your composure. It's really good way to go. EC, let's see. Yeah, so
vacation. Have time. Yeah.
Okay, I will email you today, EC. He wants to do an interview. EC Smooth, another guy, he used to have a lot of anxiety, one session like that. So I'm saying that because you agreed to do an interview we're going to talk about publicly anyways. Otherwise, I wouldn't even mention that. But yeah, I think it was one session, maybe two, and like his anxiety, like huge to like it's gone. One setting. That is superneuroplasticity, super worth it. And dude, EC's, I've been meaning to, I want to hang with you again or just talk with you on Zoom, because EC's just a cool dude. He really is, man.
He's even cooler now.
Yeah, there you go. All right, that's our show. Do both. And the doctor has some good advice here, but really do both. Give it a shot. The free program is very powerful. One-on-one session with Tim or I is even much more powerful, because we'll guide you through it, custom tailored to you. Totally worth it. It'll change your life. And once you rewire your subconscious, even with the free stuff, you're going to have a realization. What is that realization? You will realize you have more power than you know. That's our show. Thank you.